Hey, everybody. It is the Tech Founder Show here at Insivia. I'm alone today. Tony is sick and has a little case of COVID, and so he's not with us today. But I am excited for today's show. I have a great guest to talk to. It's Heather Shoemaker of Language IO. And they provide Fortune 500s with to break through language barriers for global customer support. So it's going to be a really fun conversation. If you've got questions, please add them into the chat. And let's bring Heather on now. Hey, Heather, how are you doing?
Good, Andy. Thank you so much for having me today. I'm excited to be here.
Same. We're really excited to have you. So I think the first place to start is to let our audience know a little bit about Language IO. What does it do? Who's it for?
Well, actually, you did a great elevator pitch for Language IO. In a nutshell, we sell technology that empowers companies to use their existing customer support team, often a monolingual English-only customer support team, to provide customer support in any language. And we do that through a unique proprietary technology that we can dive into today if you want to.
Yeah, that's great. And so the thing that I always want to hear to start this out is, how'd you get here? What's the origin story? Where were you before and what got you into creating this company?
Sure. So I've always loved languages. My bachelor's degree is in linguistics from the University of Washington in Seattle.
Wow.
So I graduated with this degree, speaking Spanish fluently, speaking some Portuguese and some French, and realized that I was never going to make a lot of money as a linguist. I worked for a while as an interpreter for immigration naturalization services. I tended bar, I waited tables. I actually tried my hand at newspaper reporting, which was fun for a little while. And then I decided to go back to school in engineering. It was back when it was the tech boom.
Yeah.
I thought this is a great path to go down. And I discovered that I also love writing code. It's actually just another language, right? It's just a really powerful one. And so I got my master's degree. And after I got my master's degree from the University of Colorado at Boulder, I was able to combine my love for writing code with linguistics in the field of software globalization. So I spent the first decade or so of my postgraduate career as a globalization engineer. And I traveled around the world helping big companies refactor their source code so that their software could support many languages. And what I discovered as a globalization engineer, internationalization is the technical term for it, is that the biggest challenge that companies face when they go global is not what you might expect. It's not like translating your website or even doing the hard work of internationalizing source code. It's pain, but it's doable. The biggest problem that they face is the messier problem of providing customer support in many languages. And the way that customers were attacking it at the time was to travel around the world and staff up native speaking support agents for every language they needed to support. It's not really a scalable solution to the problem, but it was the only one at the time. And so, I spent a while seeing this issue and not being able to do anything about it. I was focused on the internationalization side of things, but I started brainstorming how I might build technology to solve the problem. And eventually I exited from an acquisition at a software startup where I was directing the globalization process, and was able to, at that point, I had the freedom to go out on my own and build a solution for this problem. And it turned out there are a lot of companies interested in it.
That's really amazing. And there's a lot to unpack there, but I'm going to go back to the beginning a little bit. You got your degree in linguistics and knew all these languages. And I think someone would instantly say, oh, well, how do you go to programming? How do you go to code? But I agree with you. It's just another language. I taught myself how to program in a bunch of different languages. But I'd love you to talk a little bit about that idea for folks of, were you scared to get into programming? Was it a big shift in mindset? For those others that are out there that might have ideas for things and they think like, oh, I'd love to have a background in this, but that seems really scary.
Yeah. It was I won't date myself and tell you how long ago it was, but it was a while ago, back, like I said, during the tech boom. And at the time, I'd been reading a lot of science fiction novels,
Mm,
um, cyber science fiction by authors like William Gibson and Neil Stephenson, and even hard sci-fi like Ursula Le Guin. And I was already of the mindset that this is the future. Like the future is in cyberspace. So it wasn't really a stretch for me to say I'm going to go into software development because it sounded like a lot of fun.
mm.
Um, it's back when, yeah, everybody wanted to be a hacker, right? And so I thought I've got to learn a programming language. This is going to be a blast. And because I was already a linguist for the most part, going into writing code wasn't wasn't as daunting because linguistics is technical. It's very technical. For other folks who are more on the liberal arts side of things, writing code probably is daunting. But nowadays, if you're interested in it, there are so many online free boot camps.
Right.
Go learn Python, which is the most pervasive new language today. Um, don't be scared. Like if that's something that you're actually interested in, it's fun. It's a
Yeah.
challenge. And if you're already an entrepreneur, you're no stranger to challenges, right?
Yeah, I mean, I think there's so many resources now that you can teach yourself or get code resources or low code.
Yeah,
So, have
exactly.
you found it valuable to have that technology, background as you're building a tech company?
Oh yeah. For me, it because I wrote V1 version 1 of our original product.
Wow.
Being a founder and knowing the code inside and out and knowing exactly what we could and couldn't do or what needed to happen to enhance what we already were offering was invaluable. And there aren't, strangely, a lot of technical CEOs, not as many as you might expect. So
Yeah, we have
it
that
did give
debate
me,
on this show all the time that there's folks that, they go out and they're always looking for that CTO.
yeah,
And then there's the
yeah.
CTO and the CEO. And so I really, that's why I want to dig into it, because I think it's interesting that you're really wearing both of those hats.
I will say that when you come in from the technical side of the house, the sales side of the house becomes a lot scarier, right?
Mhm. Yeah.
Because I didn't have a sales background. And so that's a completely different skill set in my mind, being good at selling. I had no idea what went into it, how hard it was,
Hmm.
the courage that one has to go out there and make their quota. And that's been the big learning experience for me.
So I think that's great. So how did you end up doing that for those that are the technical side? Like, what was your journey into the softer sales side? Not that it's always soft, but the sales side.
Yeah, I mean, you just need to partner with talented individuals who bring to the table the skills that you lack. And you have to be really honest with yourself about what you're good at and what you're not good at. And I knew that was a blind spot for me. So I needed to pull in partners that could do that work and that were good at it. But as CEO, you can't just leave it all to other people. You do need to understand what's going on. You need to understand that it's a marketing sales is all data driven today, and you need to stay on top of those metrics. You need to know what your pipeline coverage ratio is. You need to know how close you are to making your quota, what your numbers need to be this quarter, what your growth trajectory looks like, especially when you go out for funding.
Yeah. So going ahead a little bit in your origin story, you were out implementing these internationalization solutions.
Mm-hmm.
For other people that are sitting there within organizations and they're doing something, they're saying there's a better way, I see these problems. How long did that sit in your head until you really wanted to take the jump into it?
Years.
Years.
I'd been recognizing it as a problem because every company that I would go to had the same problem, and knew that it was one that needed to be solved. I just needed to wait until I was financially in a position to go out on my own and take the time to build the solution to partner with folks that would make it all happen.
Yeah. Now, for you to get started, did you start purely on your own? Did you go out and raise capital, or did you bootstrap it from the ground up?
Yeah, the myself and the original team at Language.io, we bootstrapped it for a couple of years.
Okay.
Um, we actually coined the multilingual customer support term in the market. We recognized early on that it was a super lucrative space, and nobody else at the time was really focusing on it with that laser focus that we had. After the first couple of years of providing these solutions, we other companies started to recognize the opportunity there. You know, larger language services providers were recognizing the opportunity and started to compete with us. Other niche players would come in and target multilingual customer support. And at that point, we recognized that if we were going to maintain our market share and grow that market share, we were going to need to grow faster than we could organically. And so I want to say it was about in 2019 that I decided to go out and start the fundraising process.
Okay. I'm curious about two big decisions that we hear a lot about. One, for you, especially as a technical founder, the roadmap. When you first started, how did you figure out like these are the features we need for an MVP or to launch? And then two, the market. Who are we building for? Like it says on your website, enterprise. Was that a very conscious choice of we want to focus on Fortune 500? Or was it something that came later after you built the software?
Those are a lot of questions. So let me try to remember the first one. So as far as the product roadmap and what we chose
An
to build,
MVP.
and the MVP, yeah. So this was largely driven by our first customers.
Okay.
The first, a few of them I can talk about, a few of them I can't, but let's suffice it to say that some of our first customers were large social media companies or social media related companies. And initially, we were very much targeting big companies. And the reason for this is early on, only the bigger companies were going global, right? So companies that would be interested in what we were providing were companies that were going global, inherent. That's the nature of the thing. And so we would work with these initial companies to understand what they wanted. We rolled out initially a solution that automated the human translation process of translating the knowledge base, self-help, right? This is where even today companies save the most money if their customers can find the answer to their own questions. And the best way to make that happen is to provide perfectly translated knowledge base articles that are searchable so that, when you're hitting the support portal for whatever company it is, you can just Google your problem and find the answer on your own. Then a company's going to save a lot of money because you're not hitting them up via the more expensive email, chat, God forbid, phone channels, right? So that was the first place we went, the low-hanging fruit. And we were at a conference, and a very large social media company, a group of them came to our booth and said, "Hey, I heard about this solution that you're providing to people in our industry. Can you do the same thing for ticket translation, but make it real time, not just kind of an asynchronous automated human translation within the CRM, but real time translation?" So our English speaking support agents, who are all in Omaha, Nebraska, and who don't speak any other languages, can support our customers in Chinese and Russian and French and all of these languages that support emails are coming in as on. And so, of course, we jumped at the opportunity. This was a huge, huge company. We wanted the business, and I was still the only developer at the time. So I coded a enhancement to our solution that allowed for real-time translation and enabled these customer support agents to real-time communicate with folks in any language. Basically, where we're making these monolingual support agents multilingual with our technology. And then, of course, chat became the number one preferred support channel. We had to expand our offering into chat. At the time, we had these turnkey integrations within Oracle Service Cloud, which was a dominant CRM. It still is, has huge market share. And we realized that we needed to expand that solution into Salesforce, which started taking over market share wise in the CRM space. Because what we do is embed our solution inside of the CRM where the support agents are already working, so they don't have to
Mhm.
go out to some other third-party app. We make it very simple. So we expanded into other CRMs, and then we started to expand our core technology to make that real-time translation process accurate for the company and for the industry vertical. I'll stop there because I could go on and on.
No, I love hearing about it. I think this is great. How did you, being that sole developer, how did you attack that problem? Was it pretty innovative at the time, and it was something that you couldn't go out there and find libraries to do like you can today for almost everything?
Oh, I used every library I could. I am not a proponent of building something that I don't have to build. So yeah, where there were libraries to do what I needed to do, provided that they were secure, I would use those. And yeah, it was a lot of hard work. It was a lot of late nights, a lot of stomach dropping support
Hmm.
calls when I was ready to go to bed. But luckily we grew and I was able to build the development team. So I wasn't the only coder. And eventually we got to the point where I don't get to code anymore. It's kind of sad, but I have other challenges now that are a lot of fun.
I understand. So going back to something that you said, did you have, when you first started this, customers already lined up for the product?
We did. When I first started working on this solution, again, I'm not able to name names at this point for
Right.
everybody, but we did have one major company asking for a
Okay.
solution, and that kind of kicked off the whole process.
Yeah, that helps a lot.
It does. It really does.
That's great. So besides them, you mentioned this conference, but how did you start acquiring your first initial customers otherwise? Because that's always a challenging piece for all of our founders is, what's that first month of or first 6 months of finding customers look like, and how do they do it?
Well, first of all, before you go out looking for customers, you had asked, how do you know what the MVP is? How do you know what the market
Mm,
is? Be very sure that what you're building solves a big problem,
mm,
right? You don't want to convince people that they need your solution if it's a hard sell. I mean, what made it so easy for us was we were solving a known issue and a really hard problem to solve, and few folks were doing it at the time. So if you've got something that solves a big problem, you're way ahead. Now, the way that we got our initial customers was we bit the bullet and paid the money to have booths and sponsorships at trade shows where we know people were going to be. Now, this was a couple of years ago when everybody was going to trade shows in
right.
person. It's a little bit different today. I think they're starting up again. I'm headed to CCW in December in Las Vegas, but it's not as prevalent as it used to be.
Hmm.
So still, if you can get to those trade shows, that's how we pulled in some of the big companies. We wouldn't have gotten in front of them otherwise, and we're able to talk to them in person. Um, Getting a good marketing person, a good marketing partner on your team is key when it comes to generating inbound leads. Uh, Today, you can really leverage, SEO, SEM, content promotion. There are so many marketing channels to get word out about what you do. So
Right.
I hope that answers your question.
Yeah, for sure. One other thing that's been kind of bouncing around in my back of my head while you've been talking is competition. I know enough that the space, I would assume, over the years has become, just generally with omni communications, and I'm sure even with internationalization of that, has become competitive. How much do you pay attention to competitors and what's happening in the industry? Or, do you stay very mission focused and kind of keep your blinders on to that stuff?
No, paying attention to the competitive landscape is critical. If you're not on top of who you're competing with, you can't effectively sell your solution because you're going to go into these sales calls and people will say, "Oh, we're looking at X, Y, and Z, and you." And how do you compare? If you don't know, you can't even answer that question. You can't say how you're better. Um, so we pay very close attention to competition,
Mm.
who's getting funding in our industry, how much funding, anything we can find out about their strategy is really important to us. So yeah, it also It's easy to get discouraged when you see new competitors arrive in your space, but if you're confident in what you're offering, you should see it as validation of the market.
Mm. Yeah, that makes total sense. And, it's interesting throughout the show. I've talked to different folks, and most people are on that side of like really watching your competitors and having competitor intelligence. There are some folks that are much more like, here's the mission and vision, and
Mm-hmm.
I know what I want to accomplish, and don't pay as much attention. So I'm always interested in the different perspectives on that.
Yeah, sure. Makes perfect
Um,
sense.
you also mentioned about that customer that you met at the conference and the new feature for getting into real time.
Mm-hmm.
How much, that's a common theme that we've talked about, is getting feedback from customers to make product decisions. How much have you done that over the years? Is listen to your customers to determine the feature sets?
Oh yeah, that drives everything for us.
Okay.
So, I mean, there are strategic decisions we make as well where it might be operationally focused. Like we have to, for example, we're enhancing our self-service portal so folks can do more for themselves and not tax our ops team as much as they do. So there are strategic decisions like that where you have to expend development resources to make your organization run more efficiently. I won't deny that that's a component of what drives our product roadmap, but really what drives our product roadmap is what our customers are asking for, our existing customers, what new prospects are asking for, and what is the revenue opportunity associated with each ask. We have a great director of product, Carissa Bardwaj, and she has a very scientific approach to this whole
Hmm.
process by which she tracks every feature request, every new product request, the revenue associated with that request, and it makes our prioritization decisions pretty straightforward.
Okay, that's great. I was going to ask you if there was a system that you follow, because I think, again, for like young founders that maybe don't have a product manager and they're sitting there and they're out talking to customers, they're getting a lot of ideas. They're getting
Yep.
a lot of things come in, and I hear over and over, it's like, okay, well, how do I boil the ocean, because there's so much that they want to do. Um,
Yeah.
and, and was Go ahead.
It's easy to get bogged down in all of these requests. Just remember, tie it to revenue. Um, make decisions based on what's going to move your company forward. There may be something that sounds like a lot of fun that you want to do, but step back.
Hmm.
And I mean, we did this back when we were a company of 3 people. What's the opportunity here, and how is this really going to move my business ahead?
Yeah. So that's always been something that you feel like has been part of the DNA, is really making those revenue driven decisions.
Absolutely. You can't do it otherwise.
Yeah. No, it's great. So I'm interested in learning a little bit about, I guess, the team. How has it changed over time? Like you said you start out with three. How has it grown? What types of roles have you brought on?
Yeah, absolutely. So it's kind of interesting how COVID has changed everything for us,
Hmm.
right? Unlike most software companies, um, we are headquartered in the state of Wyoming.
Okay.
And we have a close partnership with the University of Wyoming, and we've always been able to recruit great development talent from there.
Huh.
Um, it's hard to find tech jobs in Wyoming. So when we actually all went into an office and worked together in person, we were very much focused on recruiting from the University of Wyoming and kind of growing that team here in the state. When COVID hit and we all started working from home, necessarily, we realized how productive we were. Like, how nice is it to not have to get up in the morning, get dressed, drive somewhere, park your car, walk to the office? You
Mhm.
save so much time just, you know, getting yourself in front of your screen. And I'm like, you have to look decent, right? Everybody's on Zoom today. But it's so much easier. So when COVID restrictions loosened up and we could go back into the office, we met as a group and decided, you know what, we'll keep an office for those who want to go and work together now and then. But we like this remote situation. We all felt more effective and efficient working remotely. So that became the norm, much like many companies that you hear about, like Twitter, who've said, you know what, for the foreseeable future, we are a virtual company, and Language.io went the same route. And once we made that decision, it actually freed us up to really look for talent when we were hiring key positions, not geographic location. Suddenly I wasn't limited to Wyoming and Colorado for these key hires that we needed to make. And after we completed our seed round earlier this year, we had some big scaling plans, big hires that we needed to make, on the sales and marketing side of things. And we've just gone completely virtual. I've got people all over the United States and the world for that matter. One of our most talented developers is in Beijing, and he's been working for Language.io for a couple years now, and is invaluable. Our CRO is not too far from me in Denver. Our CMO is in Seattle. Director of product is down in Texas. Like, I could go on and on. We've got folks everywhere now.
Yeah. And I'm sure for a company, obviously, that delivers the solutions that you do, having a variety of folks with a variety of backgrounds is beneficial.
Oh yeah. If we can hire somebody who speaks at least one other language, it's a big deal for us.
So more on the team, like, what were some of the key roles that you feel were important as you started to scale and grow? Like, what did you really need to place within the company?
That's a good question. Like I was saying, my blind spot, of course, is sales and marketing. And so I just really needed to have talented people, finance, right? Especially as you begin to fundraise and scale, you can't neglect finance. As a SaaS company, the investors were asking for these SaaS specific reports that a few years ago I had no idea what those were. As far as your cohort analysis and your, annual contract, your average contract size, and all of these numbers that I was supposed to be able to spit out quickly, I had to come up to speed on those. And I thought, well, I was told, you got to have a good finance person. And so we hired Meg Fahey as our director of finance. She's actually on the East Coast, and I rely on her very heavily. I hire people who are smarter than me, especially in these areas where I don't have the background and experience. And the team that you pull around you and that you build, and the culture of that team is critical to your success. You've got to hire really smart people who are smarter than you in these areas. Acknowledge your blind spots.
How have you kind of grown managed the culture? Have you let it? Yeah, I might not be able to hear you. A little technical difficulty.
Can you hear me now?
I can.
Sorry about that.
Not a problem. I was just going to ask about culture. I always wonder for folks how much it's just something that, naturally comes about, or is it something that you actively try and shape? How do you build that culture that, people want to stay within the company, because we know it's hard to keep people, and how do you attract folks?
Yeah, I mean, we know it's an employees market right now, and people have a lot of opportunities. So you have to foster a culture that, like you said, makes people want to stay. And having come, before I started Language.io, I came from a large corporate environment that in many ways was a toxic environment. I wasn't happy there. It made me realize what I don't want in corporate culture, where there's a lot of backstabbing and undermining and trying to get ahead of your colleagues at any cost. And that's no way to live, right? And I would get done with work at the end of the day and just be kind of depressed and sick to my stomach. So I knew, I was glad that I had that experience, because it made me understand what I didn't want for the future, especially in my own company. I think what makes people interested and keeps them is when they feel like they are contributing. They understand where the company is headed. They're on board with where the company is headed, and they feel like they have a role in getting the company there, and that they will be supported, that they won't be siloed, that they have a path for advancement. So, there's a lot that goes into creating that environment, but that's important. People need to feel like they're part of a team that is accomplishing something worthwhile. And luckily, in the field of linguistics and helping people talk to each other, you do have that warm and fuzzy with the Language IO, goal of helping people effectively have conversations across language barriers. And then we try to make sure that our employees understand how they're contributing, how valuable they are. We listen to them. We have this kind of servant leader mentality, transparency. Does that kind of answer your question?
Yeah. And, I'll tell you, one of the things that I'm really passionate about is developing a vivid vision and something that you get everybody aligned towards, and that, creates excitement within a company. So I'm just kind of curious if you've got any personal, tips or approaches that you've done to help evangelize that vision that you kind of talked about, to get people, excited for the future.
Oh yeah, it's critical that you evangelize. So first, you have to know what your vision is, and you have to clearly define it as a leader in your company and with your executive team, however many or few there are on your executive team. So you have to. What we do at Language IO is annually we define our objectives and key results, our OKRs. What are we doing this year, and what is our larger corporate strategy? Document that in a meaningful way, not a 20-page business plan. No few businesses do that anymore, but in small chunks that you can clearly communicate. And what I've found is when you're sick of hearing yourself say something, that's when other people have heard you. You just have to keep reiterating the same vision, reinforcing it, emphasizing it. And especially at a virtual company where everybody is working from home, that can be difficult because you don't have those in-person experiences and opportunities. And in-person is just more effective. You remember your in-person conversations, I think. And what we've done to kind of counter that is every year we have an all company offsite where we all get together somewhere in person. This year we did it in Jackson, Wyoming, which is a beautiful place. It's an amazing place to have an all company offsite. We all flew into Jackson, the Wyoming folks drove, and we only spent about half a day talking about the vision. Everyone on my executive team presented what their part in that vision was and what their goals for the year were. We only did that for about half of the day, and the rest of the couple of days, we just did fun things for team building purposes, to get to know each other, to talk about that vision, or just get to know each other. So we went on whitewater rafting, biking, hiking in Yellowstone in smaller groups, so we could really establish those relationships that are so crucial to working effectively together.
Yeah, that's an interesting thing to talk about, how, these virtual teams, and we've gone virtual too. We were in an office for a long time, and now our team is very distributed as well. But how do you continue to evangelize that vision as people go virtual? Which I think, companies are still figuring out. We've been doing a lot of different things internally ourselves, but I do think a lot of organizations are trying to figure out, with new employees and everything, how do you evangelize that vision?
It's an interesting challenge, isn't it? It's
for sure
where we're headed as in the workplace. Like, things that you wouldn't have thought of that would just blow up like Slack, right? We live in Slack as a team now. What would we do without it? I'm sure new technologies like that are going to be enabling the virtual workplace and making this communication more seamless than it is today. It'll be interesting to see what pops up next.
Yeah. While we're talking about that, I'm kind of curious how the pandemic affected you outside of obviously the change in virtual office, but was it good for business, not as good for business? How about like mental health of employees? What did you see some of the impacts of the pandemic on the business?
Yeah, as far as whether it was good or not good for business, at first it was just scary, right? Like the whole world was like, oh my goodness, what's going to happen? And so we just moved forward as best as we could and waited to see. We had an inkling that it would actually be good for Language IO, because before COVID, companies would still travel around staffing up teams of native speaking support agents to solve the multilingual customer support solution. Even though it wasn't really cost effective, they weren't actively searching for a technology solution because they did have this human solution that they could use, and that was the obvious one to use. When COVID hit, nobody was traveling. It was a lot harder to staff up teams of native speaking support agents all over the globe. And so people started more actively looking for a technology solution that enabled their already trained, effective monolingual or English speaking support agents in many cases, technology that would just enable them to support folks in many languages. And we saw our revenue and traffic and volumes of translations just skyrocket post-COVID. It was a horrible thing, but it was good for business.
Yeah. And just kind of expanding on that, the other idea that I've asked other founders about is, if you take it out of context of the pandemic and more the thought of, as owners and founders, we're going to face external threats that we can't predict and we can't control. Right. How do you as a founder, how do you look at that and handle it and manage through these things that just like jump on your lap and are a little bit scary?
Yeah, that is a great question and an important one to think through when you're considering starting your own company, because the old style of writing a business plan and sticking to it, it just doesn't work. You have to be flexible. You have to pivot when market conditions change. When you see new trends that are going to be important for you, you have to jump on them. When you see threats like COVID, you have to regroup, retrench, and figure out how you're going to move ahead. And it requires a robust personality. It requires you to be okay with that level of risk, right? To be honest with yourself, take a hard, long look in the mirror and ask yourself, is this level of risk something that I'm going to be okay with? Because it's a lot. It's a lot to take on. But if you have that level of robustness in your personality, you are good at listening, not just to data, but also to your gut. You have to be flexible.
So do you think, I'm curious, and I think I've asked this one or two other times, entrepreneurship, nature versus nurture, is it something that you can train yourself to be able to handle all the things that come with it, or is it something that you feel like is part of people's DNA?
I think it's both. Sorry to be wishy-washy on this, because I don't believe that it's ever just one or the other. I think it has to be part of your DNA. You have to have this disposition, but that disposition can be reinforced by life experiences that you've had growing up, whatever contributed to me getting to this point where I was like, you know what? I hate the corporate culture so much that I'm in right now. I'm willing to take that risk. And I'm willing to look into that abyss. What's the worst case scenario? I might fail, What am I going to do if I fail? Am I going to be okay with that? And what are the chances that I'm going to succeed? It takes a lot of soul searching, but yeah, in answer to your question, it's a combination of both.
Were there any experiences in your younger days that you think helped prepare you to like want to be an entrepreneur?
Not liking being told what to do.
That's a common one, right?
Yeah. I mean, that's not enough of a reason, but yeah, certainly those of us who think we know better don't do so well in a corporate environment where our ideas aren't listened to, where we're siloed, where we're told you have to stay on this path. This is your role. Don't deviate outside of it. I mean, I'm so glad that I was in that world for as long as I was, because you have to understand when you're selling into large corporations, you need to understand what that culture is like and what the protocols are, right? But I also, I think that my independence, wanting to just get things done, I don't have any patience for, what's the right word here, for delay. Like if I see something that needs to happen, my inclination is just to make it happen, to just do it. And you kind of have to think that way as an entrepreneur. And as the company grows, however, you do have to back off a little bit and recognize you're not going to do it all yourself. You can't. As in a scaling organization like Language.io is today, I've had to recognize, Heather, you're not going to do it all yourself. You are going to let these really talented people that you've hired do their jobs. So I'm kind of getting off on a tangent here, but
it's a fantastic tangent. And I was going to say, like, that point is so important, is that, you know, those traits that help you get started sometimes can become a challenge as you scale.
That is an excellent insight, Andy. And I think that's why a lot of entrepreneurs don't scale well, because they're not delegating. They're not letting people do their jobs. They still want to control everything and do it all themselves. And it's something that I've struggled with, that I've had to let go. If I'm going to remain CEO of Language.io, I need to scale, and I need to let people do what I hired them to do, and give up some of that control. And it's been a learning process for me.
Just kind of continuing on this tangent of the traits for entrepreneurship, I want to learn more, and I've asked a couple of our female founders about this, of, you know, what the environment is like to start a tech company as a woman and try and raise money and all of these things in a space that, you know, most people would agree is a little bit of a boys' club, right?
It totally is a boys' club. So many funny stories. I don't even know where to begin with that question. I will say that early on, when we were really small, it was easier because we weren't raising money yet. The stakes weren't as high. But even early on, when we go to these trade shows, if we would have, and these are technical trade shows, they don't expect women to know what they're talking about in SaaS, in software development. And so we'd be at a booth, and there might be a couple women and one guy for Language.io at the booth, right? All people who approached the booth immediately they beelined for the one male at our booth, right? It was hilarious. I and my colleagues would be standing there. We would be, you know, the ones who knew everything, and this one guy might be brand new. He might even be an intern. But that's who they'd go to, right?
Yeah.
So we knew it was going to be an issue. And when it really hit and became a problem was during the fundraising process. Now, if you're a woman founder in the area of fashion or babies or cosmetics or things where women are expected to be the expert,
yeah,
it was easier for you. When you're in hard tech, not so simple. I had some initial conversations with VCs in Silicon Valley, and when I explained that I wrote the version 1 of our software, I always got the sense that they were looking at me and thinking, well, if this chick could write that code, how difficult is it to replicate? Like it just, the barrier to entry can't be that high.
Mm.
That was just the feedback that I sensed from people.
Wow.
And I even at one point, told one of my colleagues, I think I'm going to present as male now. I'm going to put on a beard. I'm going to change my name to Heath and see if it's easier. Didn't go down that path, though. I very seriously considered it. I even researched voice modulation technology to make that real. But yeah, it was too much work in the end. So fundraising is a lot harder for women, I will say.
I mean, just that you thought about it and that you've got that joke in your pocket shows that it's real and it's something that was like truly in your mind, right?
A teeny tiny percentage of VC funding goes to women. Yeah. Women-run companies. I want to say it's like less than 2%. I have the statistic. I just can't remember it off the top of my head, but it's ridiculous. So yeah, it's real. The struggle is real. You know, and the other thing I'll throw out there is that I'm a mom too, and not just the founder of a tech company facing standard tech company founder challenges, but the woman in a relationship is generally expected to be the primary care provider for kids. I have 2 kids. Right. I wanted to be there for them. I was the one who was most likely to attend their honor roll presentations, go to their sporting events, be there when they are sick. We just have things are changing. Things are getting easier, but it's not equitable yet. It's not equal yet. We just have so many more obstacles in the way to, on our path to success. That there are challenges that we have that men definitely don't.
Yeah, and I'm curious to go on that a little bit too. And again, I think it is different for me as the father of 2 girls and, having my wife, but that work-life balance, and I, always hate that word, but harmony, whatever.
Yeah.
As a founder, I mean, most of us work more than a normal day.
Yeah.
Are thinking about it at night and when we shower and when we sit on the couch. How have you, as I think both just generally a person and a founder, but also that wife and mother and these other things, balance that what I need to do as a founder and how I live my life?
Yeah, there's really no silver bullet. You're going to feel, as a mom and a founder, you're going to feel guilty. You're going to be like, crap, I didn't make it to my kid's event today. And I wanted to, and I feel horrible about that. But this is where you have to, again, be good at delegating. If you have a partner, you have to accept that you're going to split that time equally as you possibly can, and let go of that and say, okay, partner, you're on today. You're going to have to take our kid to their doctor appointment because I have this really important pitch. There's no getting around it. But I think what makes it work in the end is if you love the process and you love what you're doing, and those sacrifices are worth it. I have 2 daughters, and I feel like having them see me in this responsible role and starting something and seeing it through and being a leader is so important for them to see. My husband also has his own company, so we both are entrepreneurs, but they see us both doing it. So they know that it's a possibility for themselves, that I want them to be leaders if that's what they want.
Yeah. No, I agree. And I've had that conversation with others, is the influence on your children of doing this and setting that example. And I have 2 young daughters, 5 and 7, and I want both of them to see this and, do whatever they want in life. So.
Exactly. They can do it.
Yeah. Just to spin around a little bit, fundraising we've talked about, and it does tie into what you've just kind of been describing, but, with every founder, I talk about how much of a bear that can be and, almost a full-time job. What insights for other folks that are thinking about going out to raise capital would you give?
Yeah, I will say there's so many insights. I will say, don't get discouraged and don't let no's I don't mean no's, I mean N-O, the answer no, just make you feel inadequate or that you did the wrong thing. Because you'll talk to so many investors who don't get your technology. They don't have any background in your space, so they don't see the opportunity that you see, nor can you make them see the opportunity. And they might say something like I heard so many times, we don't see that there's a big enough barrier to entry. Anybody can do this. Like, we're not going to invest in you. I knew that wasn't true, but they didn't have the experience to know that it wasn't true. And so, yeah, you have to get, you're going to get pushed down, and you have to get back up, get back on your feet. Don't get discouraged from hearing the answer no, because eventually if you know that your technology or what you've built solves a critical problem, you've done the research, you know it's a large total addressable market that you're going after, and you're confident in what you're doing, and you love what you're doing, and you believe in it, you just keep looking until you find the investor that gets it. I heard no many times. I always use the example of the pet toy startup Chewy. You've probably heard of Chewy. You can buy stuff online for your pets. There was an article by associated with the founder of Chewy where he was saying he had over 100 VC conversations, 100 no's before he got a yes. And then his business blew up, right? He got the funding that he needed. He believed in what he was doing. What really helps is to find an investor that gets your space. If they've got investments in tangential markets, they're not going to invest in you if they've already invested in a direct competitor. That's a no-no. But if they've already invested in a similar space, they're going to get your market. You're not going to have to work as hard to educate them and explain why it's such an important problem to solve. So it really speeds.
And they bring more than money. They bring potentially connections.
You got it.
Yeah, that's great. So tell me a little bit, as we're starting to wrap up, what does the future hold for Language.io? Where are you guys headed? What are you excited about coming up?
So many things. So we've historically been very much focused on enabling human support agents to provide support in any language. Where customer support is headed today is in automated engagement, chatbots, digital assistants, conversational AI. I'm not sure if it's actually most, a lot of those customer support engagements today are initiated with a chatbot. You're going to go to a website, you're going to see a little chatbot pop up, ask you what you want to talk about, right? So interestingly, spinning up or configuring a chatbot, especially a conversational AI-based chatbot in one language is much harder than people realize.
Right, yeah.
They put so much time and energy and resources into making a single language chatbot effective and efficient. When they're faced with the daunting task of replicating that work for every language they need to support, statistics show they abandon the effort in many cases. So what Language.io is focused on today is not just making those human support agents multilingual, but taking a monolingual chatbot and providing this layer between the customer and the chatbot that makes that chatbot multilingual. And we've already released a solution for this on the Salesforce platform. We're going to be doing it for other CRM platforms as well in the very near future. And we're super excited about that. That's where customer support is headed. We're also diving into the speech arena. So also today, as you know, everybody wants to talk to their devices. They don't want to have to type anymore. It's so hard to type. I have a 13-year-old and she just gets irritated when she can't talk to her phone and tell it what she has to type. She's gonna give up. And so everybody's kind of in that boat. And we recognize that whether it's somebody talking to a human support agent or a chatbot, voice is the future. And we are, our R&D team is very focused on a proof of concept in the voice space where we're going to be converting voice into text accurately, which is a challenge unto itself. That has nothing to do with translation per se. Right. again, once we've got the text, and this all happens real time in microseconds, we are able to translate it into the language of the virtual assistant or into the language of the human agent, whoever needs to consume that. Letting the ecosystem function monolingually, like I described, and then when the response is ready, pushing that back out as translated voice. That makes sense.
Yeah, totally. So before I ask my last question that I ask every founder, where can folks out there find you or Language.io if they're interested in learning more?
Yeah, it's pretty straightforward. Go to www.languageio.com. To be crystal clear, we do not have the domain yet, language.io. It's parked and very expensive. We'll get it one day. But yeah, languageio.com.
Okay, perfect. So the question that I ask everybody is, if you were able to go back in time before you started this business and have coffee with yourself, what advice would you give?
Oh, geez, there's so much advice I would give. Let me think about this one. I would say, self, get ready. Get ready for a really exciting ride. There's going to be disappointments. You're going to have very low points where you're not sure it's going to work. But in the end, and I mean, end is a relative term. Are we ever at the end? It's going to be fun, and you're going to have an adventure, and it's much better than staying in the stifling environment that you're in. I mean, it's scary to leave the corporate world where you have a high salary and comfort and security. And that was what was scary for me, was leaving that comfort and venturing into this unknown. But I would tell myself that it's worth it, that, there's no draft version of your life. It's right now. This is it. So do what makes you happy.
There's no draft version of your life. I love it. Awesome, Heather. Thank you so much for taking this time with us. I really appreciate it.
Thank you, Andy. It was great talking to you.
Awesome. Well, thank you everybody for watching, and tune in. We've got more founders coming, and we appreciate everybody. Thanks again, Heather.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.